In honor of Black History Month, the Black Faculty Task Force and the Ethnic Studies Department at Delta College bring you the Sankofa Series 2023. This year, our theme is Kuumba, the Creativity Collection, and Session 1 is Black Theater, 200 Years of Magic. Let's start with connecting to the topic. When you think of the history of Black or African American theater, what comes to mind? Maybe it's the early minstrel shows of the 1800s or vaudeville shows, or perhaps it's icons such as Harry Belafonte or classics like The Color Purple or The Wiz. Not many of us are aware of the 200-year history of Black theater in America, and this presentation will explore the glory, the creativity, the talent, and the magic of 200 years of Black and African American theater. Let's begin with one of the earliest examples of Black theater in America. William A. Brown was a freed Black man from the West Indies living in New York City. In 1821, he founded and operated the African Grove Theater, the first resident all-Black theater company in America, which performed Shakespearean plays. The African Grove Theater was founded 6 years before enslavement was completely abolished in New York State, and it became an important place of artistic expression for free Black people in New York City. The African Grove put on the first all-Black productions of Shakespeare in the United States. Performing for mostly Black audiences, the African Company put on performances ranging from Othello and Don Juan to original works. The performances were attended by both free and enslaved Black people, as well as white middle-class citizens. The very first play performed by the African Company was Richard III, a Shakespeare play. While it was likely picked because it was one of the most often performed plays at the time, the choice of Shakespeare was also deliberate for two main reasons. A performance of Shakespeare would be a performance of a culturally authorized text, while the story of Richard III itself attempted to achieve things through a sort of a dexterous maneuvering of people, mirroring the negotiations that enslaved people had to navigate for their freedom. The theater was unfortunately shut down by the authorities based on alleged outrageous behavior, and it was burned down under mysterious circumstances only 5 years after its doors first opened. Can you imagine that exactly 200 years ago, in 1823, William Brown wrote the first known play by an African-American playwright called The Drama of King Shadaway. It told the story of the exile of the Garifuna people from their homeland of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to Honduras, Central America. Unfortunately, no copies of this play are known to exist. Actor James Hewlett was a frequent guest of the African Grove and a theater enthusiast. He helped inspire Brown to create the theater, and he would go on to become the first African American man to play Othello. Actor Ira Aldridge also got his start in the African Company and later went on to become a successful Shakespearean actor in Europe. In the mid-1800s, Black theater emerged as a platform to reflect and expose the ills of our nation. William Wells Brown wrote a play in 1857 which juxtaposed a stereotypical Black male character with an exemplary Black male character in his play The Escape, or A Leap for Freedom. Because during the time period, most African Americans were poorly depicted on mainstream stages, specifically through minstrel shows, this play highlighted the difference between the images created by Black people for Black audiences and an image created by white people for white audiences, and was received with great esteem. Another important playwright from the mid 1800s was Will Marion Cook from Washington, D.C. He studied music from the age of 13 with the aim of becoming a concert violinist, but then began composing Black accented songs, which turned into the first Black musicals. He had a small success with his first full stage piece, the 45-minute Clorinda, otherwise titled The Origin of the Cakewalk. Clorinda premiered in 1898 as the first Broadway musical to feature an all-Black cast. Composer Paul Laurence Dunbar also collaborated on the play and eventually persuaded the manager of the Casino Theater's roof garden to present it. The play starred the famous performer Ernest Hogan, and it was a hit. Moving into the early 20th century, in 1903, the first full-length musical comedy to feature an all-Black cast and writing team to play inside a major Broadway theater was In Dahomey, a Negro musical comedy, which satirized the Back to Africa movement of the early 19th century. It ran for 53 performances at the New York Theater and went on tour nationally and internationally. Unfortunately, this play still was hanging on to the use of blackface, even for its Black performers. The first real success of an African American dramatist was Angelina W. Grimke's Rachel. In 1915, the 7-year-old National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, asked Grimke to write a play to counteract the defamations against African Americans shown in D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. In the words of Angelina Grimke, "There is a time coming, and soon, when no colored man, no colored woman, no colored child, born or unborn, will be safe in this country." Originally titled Blessed Are the Barren, Grimke's work, which was changed to the title Rachel, was first performed in 1916 in Washington, D.C., and a year later in New York City. From the write-up, never before has the pathos and the tragedy of the Black man's burden been more vividly portrayed than in this play. In Plays of Negro Life, 1927, the educator and author Alain Locke, the first African-American Rhodes Scholar, wrote that Rachel was apparently the first successful drama written by a Negro and interpreted by Negro actors. Rachel was also the first play produced in the United States to be created by an African-American widow and lesbian. Unbeknownst to many, Angelina Grimke's play Rachel is credited with sparking the Harlem Renaissance. It was one of the first plays by a woman of color to be performed and among the first to protest lynching and racial violence. In 1921, Shuffle Along became the first full-fledged Broadway musical with an all-Black cast, playwright, composer, and lyricist. The show was a hit, running for about 484 nights on Broadway, which was a record at the time. Shuffle Along recently came back into the mainstream when George C. Wolfe wrote and directed an adaptation that also detailed the backstage saga of the original's creation. Another early Broadway play was Appearances by Garland Anderson, which premiered in 1925. Garland Anderson wrote this play in only 3 weeks, and it ran for 3 weeks on Broadway. Langston Hughes was not only a poet but also a playwright. His play Mulatto was a play about race issues. It premiered in 1935 and ran for 11 months and 373 performances, and was one of the earliest Broadway plays to combine father and son conflicts with racial conflicts as well. In 1935, the Federal Theater Project was founded, providing a training ground for African American actors. The Federal Theater established specific chapters dedicated to showcasing and celebrating the works of previously underrepresented artists in New York, in Los Angeles, and throughout the country. Its largest office was in New York City, and it set up 17 Negro theater units in cities throughout the United States. By the project's conclusion, 22 American cities had served as headquarters for Black theaters. One of those theaters was the Ethiopian Art Theater, founded in response to the racial strife of early 20th century Chicago. From 1910 to 1920, the migration of Southern Blacks to Chicago more than doubled the Black population. The Ethiopian Art Theater established Paul Robeson as America's foremost Black actor. The New York Negro Theater Unit was the most well-known of all. Two of the four federal theaters in New York City, the Lafayette Theater and the Negro Youth Theater, were dedicated to the Harlem community with the intention of developing unknown theater artists. Three plays that premiered at the Lafayette Theater were Frank H. Wilson's folk drama Walk Together Chillin', 1936, about the deportation of 100 African Americans from the South to the North to work for low wages. Conjure Man Dies, 1936, a comedy mystery. And the most popular, The Voodoo Macbeth, 1936, which was an adaptation of Shakespeare's play set on a mythical island, suggesting the Haitian's court of King Henry Christophe. Here we see images and promotion for the Negro Youth Theater in Harlem. And of course, images of the brilliance of dance performed through the African American Dance Unit. The Negro Actors Guild of America incorporated in 1936 in the state of New York. The 10 articles for the Certificate of Incorporation address the welfare, appreciation, and development of Black artists. The NAG was designed to create better opportunities for Black actors during a period in America where the country was at a crossroads regarding how its citizens of color would be depicted in film, television, and stage. It stressed in its former articles the need for more realistic roles for people of color and helped foster the skills of African American actors and worked to generate more acting opportunities for the Black community in the industry. In the late 1930s, Black community theaters began to appear, revealing talents such as those of the beloved Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. By 1940, Black theater was firmly grounded in the American Negro Theater and the Negro Playwrights Company. Let's now reflect on some of the most pioneering Black playwrights, productions, and actors of the 20th century. One of the treasures of the Harlem Renaissance is Zora Neale Hurston's 1926 production, Colorstruck, which explored themes of colorism, self-destruction, and hatred. It focused on intra-racial racism and warned of the adverse effects of harboring hatred. Colorstruck was first published in Fire magazine, and it won second prize in the Opportunity magazine's contest for Best Play. In 1935, George and Ira Gershwin penned the opera Porgy and Bess, featuring a revolutionary all-black cast of classically trained singers. Singer Al Jolson initially attempted to mount the musical version of Porgy, starring himself in blackface, but that effort floundered in 1932 and left the doors open for the Gershwin-Hayward collaboration. Even though it was criticized for stereotyping African Americans with depictions of drug abuse, poverty, and prostitution, it has been revived on Broadway 7 times. Let's introduce some Black Tony Award-winning actors. We'll start with Juanita Hall, who played Bloody Mary in the original 1949 production of South Pacific. Juanita Hall was the first African-American performer to ever win a Tony Award, and she has 12 other Broadway credits to her name, including Flower Drum Song, and she starred in the film versions of both musicals. After World War II, Black theater grew more progressive, more radical, and more militant, reflecting the ideals of Black revolution and seeking to establish a mythology and symbolism apart from white culture. Councils were organized to abolish the use of racial stereotypes in theater and to integrate African American playwrights into the mainstream of American dramaturgy. Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, 1959, and other successful Black plays of the 1950s portrayed the difficulty of maintaining an identity in a society where you were often degraded. The inspiring, the admirable, and the wonderful couple, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, who are Black American theater legends. The credits due to Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis are too numerous to name in this presentation, but here is but a snapshot of their wonderful contributions to theater. Singer, songwriter, actor, and activist, Harry Belafonte made his Broadway debut in John Murray Anderson's Almanac in 1953, for which he won a Best Featured Actor in a Musical Tony Award. Diahann Carroll became the first Black woman to win the Tony for Best Actress in a Musical in 1962 for the play No Strings. The 1960s saw the emergence of a new Black theater, angrier and more defiant than its predecessors, with Amiri Baraka, originally Leroy Jones, as its strongest proponent. Baraka's plays, including the award-winning Dutchman of 1964, depicted whites' exploitation of African Americans. In 1965, Amiri Baraka established the Black Arts Repertory Theater in Harlem and inspired playwright Ed Bullins and others seeking to create a strong Black aesthetic in American theater. In 1969, James Earl Jones made Tony history for his leading turn in The Great White Hope. He was awarded Best Actor in a Play at the Tony Awards and was the first African-American winner in any play category. The acting legend is also one of the few artists to win an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Award, giving him the status of EGOT. In 1970, Cleavon Little and Melba Jones both won Tony Awards for their performances in Pearlie. Ben Vereen won his Tony for his role in Pippin in 1973. A choreopoem is a work of art that combines dance, music, and poetry. Because the medium focuses as much on nonverbal communication as the written word, choreopoems are performance pieces. Intozake Shange originated this format in 1974 with For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. It debuted in San Francisco and later made its Broadway debut in 1976. She performed in the first show as the Lady in Orange, and in earlier performances, she appeared as the Lady in Brown. Sometimes referred to as For Colored Girls, this work is the foundation of Shange's lasting legacy as a multidisciplinary artist. Trinidadian-born Jeffrey Holder was the first African-American director to win Best Director of a Musical, as well as the first to win Best Costume Design in a Musical. He won both Tonys for The Wiz, a seminal musical that featured an R&B, soul score, and an all-black cast. Charlie Smalls was brought on as the composer and lyricist for the show. His mix of gospel, soul, and blues influenced music and created a fun and winning blend. The Wiz opened on Broadway at the Majestic Theater in 1975. And its hit song, Ease On Down the Road, helped market the show and turn it into a success. Fences, a play in 2 acts, was written by August Wilson and was performed in 1985 and published in 1986. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 1987 and was the second in Wilson's series of plays depicting African American life in the 20th century. Set in 1957, Fences stars the protagonist, Troy Maxson, who was an outstanding baseball player at a time when the major leagues were closed to black players. Both Mary Alice and James Earl Jones won Tony Awards for their roles in the play Fences. In 2013, the incomparable Cicely Tyson won Best Actress in a Play for her role in The Trip to Bountiful. George C. Wolfe is one of the most celebrated Black American playwrights and directors of theater and film. He is the most nominated African American artist of all time, with 22 Tony nominations and 5 wins. His works explore themes of racism, stereotypes, intra-community conflicts in Black culture, and the ongoing legacy of slavery and segregation. His play, The Colored Museum, received overwhelming critical praise for its provocative subject matter and in-depth exploration of the African American theatrical and cultural past. Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel and the 1985 Steven Spielberg film The Color Purple is the story of Celie, an aspiring young woman whose personal awakening over the course of 40 years forms the arc of her epic journey. The Color Purple is a story of hope, a testament to the healing power of love, and a celebration of African American life. It premiered at the Alliance Theater in Georgia in 2005, where it was nominated for 11 2006 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, Best Book, and Best Original Score. The London Off-West End production moved to Broadway in 2015 and won the Tony Award for the Best Revival of a Musical. Dominique Morisseau's Pipeline delves into the urgent issue of the school-to-prison pipeline that ensnares too many people of color. Issues of class, race, parenting, and education in America are brought to the front lines and forces viewers to question the systematic structures that ultimately trap underserved communities. Pipeline confirms Dominique Morisseau's reputation as a playwright of piercing eloquence. when Audra McDonald won the 2014 Best Leading Actress in a Play Tony for Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill. She set 2 records, becoming the first performer ever to win 6 Tony Awards and also to win in all 4 acting categories. Cynthia Erivo and Jennifer Hudson starred in The Color Purple, and in 2016, Cynthia won a Tony for the Best Actress in a Musical. And finally, the revolutionary musical Hamilton swept the 2016 Tonys, including wins for 3 of its leads: Renee Elise Goldsberry, Leslie Odom Jr., and Daveed Diggs. Here we present a lengthy list of Black Tony Award winners and the number of awards that they have received. This spans for 2 slides, so take your time perusing. We hope that the glorious history presented in this session of the Sankofa Series has inspired you to integrate some of the content into your own lessons. There are many resources online that have ready-made curriculum and lesson plans specifically for many of the plays and performances that we have seen in this presentation. We encourage you to go and research and look up some of the titles of the plays that you've seen in this series and use them with your students to explore more of the history, of the social context of the era, and of the beautiful art that is Black theater. Thank you so much for sharing this moment in Black history with us. Please tune into session 2 of the Sankofa series. And may peace be with you always.